or that he was also fired from a fire department in Middletown, Connecticut, allegedly because he raised some safety concerns. In particular, the Slate article trying to paint him as a vexatious litigant. That's what we call it in the law. People who just sue. They're sue happy, essentially. And let me just read you what the Slate article says and get you to respond, Karen. It says, quote, Perhaps he was repeatedly victimized by a cruel cadre of employers, first for his dyslexia, then again for his role as a whistleblower, and then a third time for just being white. If that is so, we should all be deeply grateful for the robust civil rights laws that protect Americans from unfair discrimination. The other way to look at Frank Ricci is as a serial plaintiff, one who reacts to professional slights and setbacks by filing suit, by threatening to file suit, and by more or less complaining his way up the chain of command, not the typical GOP heartthrob.
Oh, it doesn't surprise me that Dahlia Lithwick would try to smear Ricci like that. Dahlia Lithwick, despite trying to pass herself off as a mainstream Supreme Court analyst, has done nothing but take sides with the city of New Haven and write a lot of misleading articles about our case. I actually called her on it by sending her emails because she wouldn't even report the facts accurately, and she ignored those emails. So I'm not surprised that Lithwick would do it. The fact is that, you know, for the first time, non-minority firefighters in New Haven decided to sue. That had never happened before, Megyn. All of the lawsuits in New Haven and elsewhere around the country, and there have been hundreds of them, were filed by black firefighters, black police officers, the NAACP, organized interest groups comprised of black officers. And Dahlia Lithwick doesn't seem to think those groups or individuals are litigious, does she? I mean, Frank Ricci filed 2 lawsuits, and both of them he won. So in both cases...
And Frank was not the only plaintiff in this case.
That's right. He was joined by 19 other individuals. But the point is that twice Frank Ricci brought a lawsuit, and twice he prevailed and showed that his civil rights were demonstrated. And why would any American, and especially liberals who purport to champion civil rights, have a problem with that?
Well, certainly the United States Supreme Court saw it Frank's way and ultimately handed him a victory, saying he was absolutely right to sue, and that Judge Sotomayor and her panelists had gotten it wrong. But, Karen, let me ask you, does this remind you at all of what happened to Joe the plumber, who asked a question of President Obama, who was then candidate Obama, on a rope line, and then became public enemy number 1, then became a target for some on the left who said things like, and this came from Howard Wolfson on my morning show one day, saying that the GOP had dropped the ball because it, quote, failed to vet Joe the plumber. I mean, are you surprised to hear similar, to find out that Frank Ricci, your client, is now being made a target as well?
I am not at all surprised, Megyn. Joe the plumber came to mind quickly when the attacks on Frank Ricci started. And I think if this shows Americans anything, it is the complete and utter hypocrisy of the left and liberals in this country. They are unquestionably vicious. And they're the ones who purport to be the nice people, and they always slam conservatives as somehow being unfeeling or cold or not, predisposed toward being tolerant towards other people. These people are vicious. And I think it's a good thing for Americans to realize just exactly the kind of people that we've put in control of the American government right now.
Well, in defense of the left, so far it doesn't seem to be gaining traction. I mean, it's this left-wing group, People for the American Way, and it's Slate, which we know leans left. We certainly didn't hear anything like that from any of the Democratic senators. Let me ask you this before I let you go, Karen. Is Frank still going to testify?
Yes, he is. You know, he's been asked to do so. He didn't ask to go to Washington. They asked him to come. And listening to part of the hearings this morning, there was talk from one or more senators about the fact that at least President Obama and certain Democrats are insisting that a Supreme Court justice understand the lives of real people and how their conduct on the bench can affect the lives of real people. Well, you can't get a better example of ordinary, real Americans than Frank Ricci and Lieutenant Ben Vargas. These are real people who had an important case come into the federal court, and I think their case shows the importance of the judiciary to the lives of the American people.
Well, we will be watching, as I think many Americans will be, perhaps more than even before, when they take to the stand to offer their thoughts on this confirmation hearing. Karen, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
My pleasure, Megyn.